My general advice is to answer a responding or composing section question that includes at least one of these 4 concepts, because such questions are typically pretty straightforward. This lesson's going to give you the understanding that you need to ace those questions.
Everything you need to easily pass English ATAR. English ATAR made simple. Powered by Saints Coaching.
Concepts, themes, issues, and ideas. This is the last substantial lesson in Module 2, and Module 2 is the most substantial module in the entire course. Well done for getting to this point, seriously. You are so close to understanding every concept in English ATAR. That is no small feat. Here are all the times these 4 concepts have appeared in past WACE exam questions between 2016 and 2022. Themes, ideas, issues, concepts, 2016. Ideas and concepts, 2017. Ideas and themes, 2018. Ideas and themes, 2019. Ideas in 2020. Ideas in 2021. And themes, issues, ideas in 2022. Ideas are obviously the most popular concept for these past WACE exam questions, and concept is the least popular concept among these past WACE exam questions. I don't blame you if you're thinking, well, I'll just learn about ideas and I'll be fine. However, trust me when I say that understanding concepts, themes, and issues will then help you to understand the concept of ideas much better. And here are the relevant syllabus points. We have 3. Some observations based on what we see here on the slide. Similar to what I mentioned a moment ago, the concept of ideas is the most popular concept in the syllabus points, at least in these syllabus points. This first syllabus point tells us that all 4 concepts are indeed related because the syllabus point mentions all 4 of them in the same point. And as I mentioned earlier, that is really why we are looking at these 4 concepts in the same lesson, because they're easier to understand when you compare and contrast them. You might already be aware that these 4 concepts are similar, but merely knowing that they're similar isn't enough. If you get a question in, say, the responding section that requires you to choose between writing about a theme, idea, and concept, you need to be aware of the difference between those different concepts if you want to maximize your marks to that question. You need to be aware of the differences in how we articulate a theme versus an idea versus a concept in that instance. So as you watch this lesson, bear in mind that the key focus is for you to be able to articulate examples of themes, issues, ideas, and concepts in such a way that a marker can clearly identify that you understand the difference between those 4 concepts. Lesson objectives. Firstly, outline the interplay between a concept, theme, issue, and idea. Then we'll understand concepts. We'll define concept, discuss examples of concepts, move on to themes, define theme, discuss 6 common themes, explain how to identify and create themes. Then moving on to issues, we will define issue, outline the interplay between genre and issues. From there, we'll move on to ideas. We will define idea, outline the elements of an idea, list examples of ideas. Then we will get to really the crux of the lesson, explain how to express concepts, themes, issues, and ideas. Then we'll determine how to express a concept individually, how to express a theme, how to express an issue, how to express an idea. After that, discuss examples that illustrate the interplay between concepts, themes, issues, and ideas. Discuss example 1, discuss example 2, summarize the interplay, analyze past WACE exam questions, explain how to approach analytical questions, explain how to approach creative questions, and then outline a simple summary. Don't be overwhelmed by all of those objectives. This lesson, despite having so many different dot points, shouldn't be as long as the previous one, especially won't be as long as the one on voice. Before we have a look at what each of these topics mean individually, I'd like to highlight how they relate to one another at the outset. The easiest way to do this is to think of a spectrum. On the left-hand side of the spectrum is general, and on the right-hand side of the spectrum is specific. This is how each topic that we're looking at in this lesson relates to the spectrum, fits on the spectrum. We have concept over on the left-hand side, it's general, then getting slightly more specific is theme. Getting more specific still is issue, and the most specific is idea. To summarize, a concept is the most general unit of meaning. A theme is still a general unit of meaning, but it's a little bit more specific than a concept. An issue is a specific unit of meaning, and an idea is the most specific unit of meaning. This whole unit of meaning thing will make more sense as we get to expressing concepts, themes, issues, and ideas. In the meantime, just bear in mind that this spectrum goes from general to specific. Concept starts at the most general, then theme, then issue, then idea, or CTII. That is why the lesson is called concept, theme, issue, idea in that order. Now let's have a discussion of each of these topics individually, starting with concepts. This word isn't defined in the SCASA glossary, and most dictionaries just define it as an abstract idea. To me, that doesn't really help us that much because it just creates confusion between what a concept is and what an idea is. So to avoid that confusion, we'll use the word notion instead of idea, which gives us the following overarching definition of a concept. Simply an abstract notion. Importantly, a concept is a notion that doesn't have a physical or concrete existence. This mug has a physical, concrete existence. It's tangible. I can pick it up, hold it, drink from it. Whereas, say, the concept of monogamy, that does not have a physical, concrete existence. I cannot pick up monogamy. I can practice it by being devoted to one partner, but it's not something that I can feel or touch. Let's check out some examples of concepts. You might have noticed that at the beginning of every lesson, I've said something along the lines of, here are all the times the concept of ... has appeared in a past WACE exam question. I have done this because each topic that we have covered in this module is a concept. Think about the following topics and how they fall into the definition of a concept, which, as you recall, is just an abstract notion. It's something that doesn't have a physical or concrete existence. Language features, structure, genre, etc. All of these topics are examples of concepts because they're things that exist in the abstract. They don't have a physical or concrete presence. Which leads us to our first key takeaway. A good rule of thumb for determining whether something is a concept is to ask whether that thing has a concrete, tangible, or physical existence. If it does, it's not a concept. If it doesn't, it is a concept. For example, a banana is something tangible. You can pick it up, so it is not a concept. On the other hand, voice, the concept of voice, that is not something that is tangible. I can't pick up the concept of voice, therefore it is a concept. Moving on to themes. See? Concepts already out of the way. Nice and easy. Our definition. This is what the glossary has to say about it. An idea, concern, or argument developed in a text, a recurring element. For example, the subject of a text may be love, and its theme could be how love involves sacrifice. A work may have more than one theme. This first part of the first sentence doesn't really help us in our attempt to differentiate between a concept, theme, issue, and idea because it says that a theme can be an idea. So we are going to use the recurring element part of this definition in our own. But before we turn to our overarching definition, a quick note, and that is to emphasize this last sentence. A text may and often will have more than one theme, which is a good thing because that means you have flexibility in the theme or themes that you discuss. Okay, this is our definition of a theme, a recurring and underlying element explored in a text. You have a lot of leeway in how you actually express a theme, but I thought it would be useful if we go through 6 common themes, 6 themes that often appear in literary texts. If you're unsure what the themes are in a text that you're analyzing in class or in, say, the comprehending section of an exam, turn to these 6 themes. Chances are at least one of them will be relevant to the given text. These 6 themes come from this source, the Complete Guide to Literary Themes, definition, examples, and how to create literary themes in your writing. This is a masterclass article. It's linked in the resources tab below the video. You don't have to go and read it, but you can if you want to. And our 6 themes are, firstly, good versus evil. That masterclass article describes this theme as follows. A story about good triumphing over evil may pit two characters directly against each other, or a main character against society at large. An example of two characters being pitted against each other, Harry Potter, we have Harry Potter versus Voldemort. I said his name. Another example is To Kill a Mockingbird. In that book, we have Atticus Finch, the protagonist, who is pitted against society. Our next theme is love. The masterclass article describes this one as follows. Love can be a force for good that inspires people to sacrifice themselves for others, or a toxic force that drives people to madness or violence. This theme of love is actually quite broad and includes multiple different types of love. One type is forbidden love, like we see in Romeo and Juliet. Another type is family love, like we see in My Sister's Keeper. Another type is unrequited love, which just means love that isn't reciprocated. For instance, if I love my girlfriend, but she doesn't love me back. Example of that is the Phantom of the Opera. And another type of love is friendship love, the love that you have of a friend. And we see that in The Lord of the Rings. Common theme number 3 is redemption. This is what the masterclass article has to say about redemption. In texts that employ redemption as a central theme, characters see the errors of their ways and strive to right the wrongs they've committed, making for an uplifting tale. Good example of this one is How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Around halfway through the movie, the Grinch recognizes that he's been mean, and then he seeks to right his wrongs for the rest of the movie. He seeks to redeem himself. Our fourth common theme is courage and perseverance. The masterclass article says, characters in stories about courage endure difficult circumstances or impossible odds, persevering through sheer determination, grit, and gall. Example is The Martian. Not sure if you've seen it, but this dude, Matt Damon, is stranded on Mars with close to no supplies. His expertise is in botany, so he manages to cultivate crops, mainly potatoes, to keep himself alive while he has to wait for over a year, I think, to get someone to come and rescue him. Courage and perseverance. Good for you, Matt Damon. Matt Damon! The fifth common theme is coming of age. The masterclass article says, a classic coming-of-age story follows one or more characters during their journey of growing up into adulthood. Example, Spider-Man Homecoming. We see Spider-Man coming of age, coming into adulthood, and then he's got the mentorship of Iron Man. Our sixth and final common theme is revenge. The masterclass article says about revenge, the theme of revenge sets up a conflict between one character and his or her enemies as he or she journeys to avenge wrongs done to them. Example, John Wick franchise. The whole thing kicks off when someone kills John Wick's dog, and then he just goes on some killing rampage. Another example is Django Unchained. Those are our 6 common themes. Now we're going to discuss how we can identify and create themes. Practical application of this section of the lesson. How you can identify themes is relevant for when you're analyzing a text, and how to create themes is relevant for when you are writing an imaginative text in the composing section. Once again, our source for a lot of the information we're about to discuss is the masterclass article. Look for or think about conflict between characters when you're identifying themes in a text or trying to create themes in a text. The masterclass article says conflict between characters creates more opportunities for actions, choices, and conversations that enable them to tackle the theme head on. Pretty good example of conflict between characters is the love triangle that exists between Edward, Bella, and Jacob in the Twilight Saga. The conflict between Edward and Jacob underscores the theme of love. Another thing to look for if you're identifying themes or to use if you're creating themes is motifs. A motif is a recurring element, a concept, image, phrase, or situation that is integral to the plot of a text. Example, Gatsby's lavish parties in The Great Gatsby are a motif that represents the theme of materialism and excess. Another thing you can look for to identify themes or use to create things is symbols. The Oxford Dictionary of English defines a symbol as a thing that stands for or represents something else. An example is Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face, in The Dark Knight. Dent's half-burnt face is a symbol of the duality of human nature. which really refers to the blurred lines between being the hero and the villain of the story, and the fallen human. Check out the Language Features Bible if you want an explanation of the difference between a motif and a symbol. Themes and concepts done, let's move on to issues. We are making good pace. Let's keep it up. Starting with a definition, Scarza says issues are the following: matters of personal or public concern that are in dispute, things which directly or indirectly affect a person or members of a society and are considered to be problems. Many issues are raised in text, and it is for the reader/audience to identify these. We'll use an adapted version of this definition for our own overarching one. Our definition is a personal or public concern that is in dispute or considered to be a problem. This is a very broad definition. How an issue differs from concept, theme, and idea will become evident soon. But now let's discuss the interplay between genre and issues. That interplay can be summarized as follows. Some genres of form and structure and subject matter emphasize issues more clearly than others. The following example makes this statement clearer. We've got documentaries versus TV series. Documentaries and non-fiction texts more generally typically emphasize issues more overtly than TV series and other fictional texts. Put differently, it's normally easier to identify issues in texts that are within the non-fictional genre of form and structure category. For example, The Social Dilemma is a documentary that explores the dangerous human impact of social media. On the other hand, Nosedive is a Black Mirror episode about a woman who's desperate to boost her social media score. Both of those texts explore the following issues. Firstly, the impact of social media on face-to-face interaction. Secondly, the accuracy of the information that's presented to us on social media. And thirdly, the consequences of social media addiction. So both of those texts explore the same issues, but if you had just watched both of those texts for the first time and I asked you which one emphasized these issues on the slide more clearly, you would probably say the documentary, The Social Dilemma. A side note, these are some issues that are presented in both texts, but they're not the only ones. What I mean by this is there is a lot of flexibility in how you articulate an issue. Before we turn to ideas, a key takeaway, and that is documentaries typically emphasize the issue or issues they explore, making them great text to analyze for this topic of issues. And finally, we have ideas. Firstly, a definition. This is what the glossary has to say. In this course, the word has an open meaning and can be interpreted as understandings, thoughts, notions, opinions, views, or beliefs. I think this definition also makes things a bit confusing, so we're going to go with the following definition instead. Our definition, the EAMS definition, is the specific comment a text makes about a concept, theme, or issue. And this definition leads us to our next section of this discussion of ideas, which is the elements of the definition. Firstly, we have a comment, which is just really an opinion. And our second element is this part of the definition about a concept, theme, or issue. And really, this just refers to something. In short, our understanding of an idea is essentially an opinion about something. Let's check out some examples. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once explores the idea that acknowledging our own infinitesimal significance in the grand scheme of the universe helps us put things into perspective. The about something element 2, is acknowledging our own infinitesimal significance in the grand scheme of the universe. And the opinion is helps us put things into perspective. Another example, Pretty Woman explores the idea that two completely different people can unite and live happily ever after. The something is two completely different people, and the opinion is can unite and live happily ever after. Finally, Interstellar explores the idea that love transcends space and time. We have the about something here, space and time, those could be concepts, and then the opinion on those concepts is that love transcends these concepts. Transcends just means goes beyond the limits of or surpasses something. The purposes of these three examples was to give you an idea, pun intended, of how you can express ideas about a text in a sentence. We'll spend more time on this in a moment. Now let's discuss some practical tips for how you can write about a concept, theme, issue, and idea in an assessment context. Before we discuss expressing each of the four topics, a brief note about syntax. Syntax is sentence structure. Here is how you can structure your sentences when you are articulating a concept, a theme, an issue, or an idea. For a concept, text name explores the concept of blank. For a theme, text name explores the theme of blank. For an issue, text name explores the issue of blank. And finally, for an idea, text name explores the idea that blank. I know this might sound really simple, but if a question requires you to analyze concepts, themes, issues, or ideas in a text, using the syntax that is on the slide here is a really effective way of signposting to the marker that you are addressing the concept, theme, issue, or idea part of the question. The word explores is a great one to use for the expression of a concept, theme, issue, and idea, but you don't want to overuse it. So check out the PDF study notes for some synonyms of this word explore. How do we express a concept? We know a concept is an abstract notion, and on our spectrum that we looked at the beginning of this lesson, it is the most general. It's on the general side of the spectrum. Typically, a concept is 1 to 2 words. For example, artificial intelligence, business, multiverse. There are more examples listed in the PDF study notes. Also, a concept typically forms part of a sentence. For example, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness explores the concept of a multiverse. The concept of the multiverse doesn't form a whole sentence, rather, it forms part of this sentence. How do we express a theme? We learned earlier that a theme is a recurring and underlying element explored in a text, and it is the next most general in our spectrum. A theme is typically 1 to 3 words. For instance, authenticity, coming of age, courage, and perseverance. Once again, more examples are in the PDF study notes. And also note that with these discussions about how to express a concept, theme, etc., I have been using the word typically. These are general rules of thumb. They aren't hard, strict rules. You can find themes that are more words than 3, but just generally speaking, this is what you'll find. As with concepts, a theme also forms part of a sentence. For example, the Black Mirror episode Nosedive explores the theme of authenticity. This theme of authenticity forms part of this sentence. Note that concepts and themes can overlap. For example, Interstellar explores the concept of love when Dr. Brand posits that love is the one thing we're capable of perceiving that transcends the dimensions of space and time. On the other hand, Interstellar explores the theme of love. Cooper embarks on his interstellar mission to ensure the survival of his children and the rest of humanity. His love for his kids fuels Cooper's perseverance to survive and return from his mission. Those are 2 examples. One example discusses love as a concept. Another example discusses love as a theme. Both are equally valid. Moving on to how to express an issue. An issue is a personal or public problem that's in dispute or considered to be a problem, and now it is getting to the specific side of the spectrum. An issue is typically several words. For example, the impact of social media on face-to-face interaction, that is an issue. The right to bear arms, that is an issue. It is in public dispute. And the characterization of aging as a disease. Once again, more examples in the PDF study notes. Similar to a concept and a theme, an issue also forms part of a sentence. For example, the book Lifespan explores the issue of characterizing aging as a disease. These words, characterizing aging as a disease, don't form a complete sentence in and of themselves. Rather, they form part of this complete sentence. Finally, how to express an idea. We learned earlier that an idea is a specific comment on a concept, theme, or issue, and it is the most specific of those 4 topics that we've discussed in this lesson. It's on the most specific side of the spectrum. Firstly, an idea is typically several words, 1 or more of which refer to a concept, theme, and/or issue that constitute a sentence. For example, the movie Clueless highlights the idea that searching too hard for love can make you miss what's right in front of you. This idea, searching too hard for love can make you miss what's right in front of you, forms a complete sentence. We could cut out the words from the to that and just have searching to you. That whole thing would be a complete sentence. It's an idea. The something element is a concept or a theme of love, and the opinion is searching too hard for it can make you miss what's right in front of you. Another example is the television series The Wire highlights the idea that delineating between right and wrong is not a simple task. Once again, this idea that delineating between right and wrong is not a simple task forms a complete sentence alone in isolation of these words in black. At the beginning of this lesson, we looked at the interplay between a concept, theme, issue, and idea, and we looked at that spectrum. Here are some examples that illustrate this interplay, and here is a quick recap of that spectrum. Concepts are the most general unit of meaning, then a theme is a slightly more specific but still general unit of meaning, an issue is a specific unit of meaning, and an idea is the most specific unit of meaning. One way to think about this relationship between going from general to specific is really how many words are used to express the given topic. We saw earlier that a concept is typically 1 to 2 words, then a theme is maybe 1 to 3, an issue is several, and an idea is usually multiple that form a complete sentence. Hence, going from general over here to specific over here. We're going to look at 2 examples, and our first one is Black Panther, directed by Ryan Coogler, came out 2018, starring Chadwick Boseman. Rest in peace. Specifically, we're going to analyze a scene that is in the resources tab below the video. Go and give that a watch and return to this lesson once you are done. Starting with a concept that's relevant in that scene. We have a concept called isolationism, which is a policy of remaining apart from the affairs of other countries. This is relevant in Black Panther because Wakanda, which is where Black Panther is from and where that scene takes place in, is literally hidden from the rest of the world. The world don't know that this part of Wakanda has all of the advanced technology and vibranium, which is what Black Panther's suit is made of. A theme that relates to this concept is tradition versus change. Focusing on the tradition part of this theme, the nation of Wakanda is a hereditary monarchy, while most other countries in the world are some form of democracy. Wakanda upholds traditions of ritual combat and coronation ceremonies. Also, Wakanda keeps its stores of vibranium secret from the rest of the world, so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Focusing on the change part of this theme, Killmonger, who's played by Michael B. Jordan, advocates for Wakanda to make its existence known to the rest of the world. He also advocates to use Wakanda's technological supremacy to, quote, liberate Black people. An issue that this theme relates to is Wakanda distributing its vibranium deposits. As I just mentioned, Killmonger wants to use these vibranium deposits to liberate Black people, so that is an issue at play here. Side note, vibranium is the stuff that Captain America's shield is made of. Killmonger wants to weaponize Wakanda's vibranium deposits, distribute those weapons globally, and use them to, quote, topple oppressive governments. This issue then leads to this idea. Rigid adherence to tradition can undermine progress. In Black Panther, Wakanda's rigid adherence to the tradition of ritual combat is the very thing that gives Killmonger the chance, the right, which he exploits, to challenge T'Challa, Black Panther, and take his throne. That's our first example illustrating the interplay between concepts, themes, issues, and ideas. Our next one is one of my favorite Black Mirror episodes, Nosedive. The protagonist is played by Bryce Dallas Howard, and there are also a few other familiar faces in the episode. Not sure if you've seen it, but we're going to be analyzing a scene. That scene is linked in the resources tab below the video. Just quickly, here is some context about the scene before you go and watch it. Essentially, this story takes place within this dystopian world where people wear like contact lenses on their eyes that enables you to see what rating someone has when you look at them. The rating is out of 5, and it's determined by each and every interaction you have with someone. Your rating then influences the way other people view you. Because everyone rates the interactions they have with you, everyone is superficial and pretentious because they want to have the best rating. The scene that you're about to watch is the final scene of the episode. Just before that, the main character, Lacey, is reprimanded by authorities after she crashes a so-called friend's wedding, which she got uninvited to because her rating got too low. The authorities then remove Lacey's contact lenses before she's placed in a jail cell. So that is what has just happened to the main character, Lacey, as the scene begins. Okay, now go and give it a watch, and I'll see you when you're back. Welcome back. As you saw, both characters in the scene look like they're having a great old time insulting one another. That's because for the first time in who knows how long, their interactions with one another aren't being rated. They're able to speak freely without consequence. They're able to be themselves. As we just did for Black Panther, let's check out what concepts, themes, issues, and ideas are relevant in that scene. No surprises here. A relevant concept is social media. Related to that concept is this idea of authenticity. As I mentioned earlier, people wear these contact lenses and everyone's interactions with each other are rated. Because everyone wants to have the best rating, people start being pretentious and fake, which then raises these questions about how many people are actually just being real and authentic. An issue that is related to the theme of authenticity is the impact of social media on face-to-face interaction. Let me ask you this. Let's say you follow someone on Instagram who has 2 million followers. You see them in the street and you go up to them and have a chat. Do you think you would change the way you interact with that person knowing that they have 2 million followers? Personally, I'd like to say I wouldn't, but in reality, I probably would act a little bit differently knowing that they have some sort of fame on Instagram. That right there is an example of the impact that social media has on our face-to-face interactions. This issue then leads to the following idea. Social media causes people to put up facades which suppress their true nature. A facade is like a mask. Returning to our concept side, another concept is freedom. In Nosedive, we have freedom of expression really being suppressed because people feel the need to be fake in order to get the highest rating. So this concept can relate to the theme of courage and perseverance, which we see towards the end of that scene where Lacey just starts verbally abusing that other dude. She has the courage and perseverance to do that once her lenses are taken out of her eyes. This theme could relate to the issue of whether social media should regulate freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is suppressed in Nosedive, but this is also a pretty topical thing in the context of Twitter. Anyway, this issue can then lead to the following idea that freedom of expression without fear of judgment is liberating. A brief note, as we established earlier with issues, there's no right or wrong way to express an issue, and there aren't really a set number of issues within a text. The same is true of ideas. You can word them in countless different ways, and there are always multiple of them in a given text. And that is our interplay between concepts, themes, issues, and themes. Here is a bit of a summary of that interplay. We're not going to go through each individual cell because we've really covered all of this already in this lesson, but this is really your cheat sheet for what we've discussed so far. Pause the video now, have a quick skim. I'll see you when you're back. Lastly, let's check out some past WACE exam questions that include the topics we've discussed already. For analytical questions in the comprehending section and responding section, you should explain how features, devices, and/or conventions represent the concept, theme, issue, and/or idea. Let's illustrate this through the following past WACE exam question. Compare how a similar idea about swimming is treated in Text 1 and Text 2. 2020 WACE exam, Section 1, Question 2. Our sample texts are The Best in the World, A Love Letter to Australia's Public Pools, and also this novel Wavelength. Hopefully the first one sounds familiar. It's a memoir that we analysed in the lesson on voice. We haven't taken a look at this second one, the novel, yet, but there's no need to read either of these excerpts for the purposes of this lesson because we're focusing on the process of analysing concepts, themes, issues, and ideas, not necessarily how well we've answered the question. So bear that in mind as I read out the following sample response. Note, this response is an excerpt and it isn't a full-length response to a comprehending section question. We'll be returning to this question and the entire response in Module 3. Text 1 employs lexical choice to convey the idea that swimming is a convenient way to take refuge from the Australian heat. In contrast, the similar idea that swimming is graceful and meditative in text 2 is treated with figurative language. Law uses language such as rambling, architectural mess, incorrect, trapped, barely slept, and looking boiled to underscore his unpleasant experience living in a share house during the depths of Australian summer. He proceeds to use diction such as refuge, pure and clean, and panoramic view to describe the nearby pool and the swimming experience as though it is a panacea for the heat. Conversely, Betts employs a simile by describing the blue light that beams down over the pool as a floodlight that shines like a beacon. A beacon symbolizes hope, and the fact that the pool's floodlight is analogized with such a symbol is a powerful reflection of the narrator's fondness for swimming. Some comments. These emboldened words convey the idea about text 1, which is swimming is a convenient way to take refuge from the Australian heat. Note the something element, element 2, is swimming, and the opinion is a convenient way to take refuge from the Australian heat. The idea in text 2 is swimming is graceful and meditative. Once again, the something element is swimming, it's a concept, and the opinion is swimming is graceful and meditative. This is the explanation of how language features are used to represent text 1's idea. The specific language feature I'm discussing is lexical choice, diction, word choice, and this is the explanation for how language features are used to represent text 2's idea. We have language features such as a simile and symbolism. So that is what a discussion of ideas could look like in a sample response. Let's check out how to approach creative questions in the composing section. For those questions, you should use features, devices, and/or conventions to embed the concept, theme, issue, and/or idea. To reiterate, in analytical questions, you should explain how features, devices, and/or conventions represent the concept, theme, issue, and/or idea. And for creative questions, you should use features, devices, and/or conventions to embed the concept, theme, issue, and/or idea. Here's our sample question. Create a text within a particular genre that explores an idea represented in this image. Note, the content of your response should imply, rather than explicitly state, what an idea represented in this image is. Hence, the use of the word embed in the key takeaway that we just saw. Once again, this response is just an excerpt of a full-length composing section answer that we'll be taking a look at in more depth in Module 5. I need the Douglas memo on my desk by 7 p.m. tonight and the research on false imprisonment by the end of Friday, Jessica demands before I get a chance to utter the second syllable. And regarding the latter, let's not fuck up the formatting this time, okay? She adds with the unblinking stare and contrived smirk that I've come to detest over the past 8 years. Absolutely, it won't happen again, I reluctantly concede. Oh, just quickly, if I have the Douglas memo on your desk by 6:30 p.m. tonight, may I leave early? My wife has, the contrived smirk returns. What about your billables, Neil? Don't think I didn't notice the 58.5 hours that you logged last week. You're not going to make up for the lost 90 minutes this week by leaving 30 minutes early, are you? That's our excerpt. Let's discuss some comments. One idea that's embedded in this text is that time dictates our lives in professional environments. Once again, this idea isn't explicitly stated in the excerpt, but it's implied. And the question arises, how is it implied? Firstly, legal jargon is sprinkled throughout the excerpt, which tells the reader that the professional environment is a law firm. We've got legal jargon such as memo, research on false imprisonment, formatting, and billables. Next, there are repeated references to time throughout the excerpt, which highlights that time is a major priority for Neil's boss and the law firm at large. Examples: by 7 p.m. tonight, by the end of Friday, over the past 8 years, by 6:30 p.m. tonight, 58.5 hours that you logged last week, make up for the lost 90 minutes, leaving 30 minutes early. And lastly, rhetorical questions are used by Neil's boss at the end of the excerpt to insinuate that Neil can't leave 30 minutes early because he didn't log 90 minutes of work that he should have the week prior. This is reinforcing the idea that time is dictating our professional lives. And that is all the content, all the main content for this lesson. Simple summary time. first part of this lesson, we looked at the interplay between a concept, theme, issue, and idea. That interplay is demonstrated as follows: concept, theme, issue, idea. The interplay was represented visually through a diagram or a spectrum, and that spectrum showed that the general side is on the left and the specific side is on the right. So we go from most general, which is a concept, to a little bit more specific but still general, which is a theme, to a issue, which is more specific, and then an idea, which is most specific. From there, we looked at concepts, and our definition of a concept is simply an abstract notion. Next subsection of this lesson was examples of concepts, and a key takeaway for this part of the lesson was that a good rule of thumb for determining whether something is a concept is to ask whether that thing has a concrete, tangible, physical existence, like this mug, and if it does, it is not a concept. If it doesn't, it is a concept. From there, we discussed themes, and our definition of a theme is a recurring and underlying element explored in a text. We discussed 6 common themes. Those are good versus evil, love, redemption, courage and perseverance, coming of age, and revenge. Then we looked at how to identify and create themes. We learned in this part of the lesson that you can identify and create themes through conflict between characters, motifs, and symbols. After that, we discussed issues. Our definition of an issue is a personal or public concern that is in dispute or considered to be a problem. Then we discussed the interplay between genre and issues. Key takeaway here was that documentaries typically emphasize the issue or issues they explore, making them great text to analyze for this topic. After that, we looked at ideas. Our definition of an idea is the specific comment a text makes about a concept, theme, or issue. Elements of that definition, there are 2. Firstly, we have a comment, and that comment refers to the second element, which is about a concept, theme, or issue. After that, we discussed examples of ideas, which you can refer to the study notes to check out those examples. The examples were about Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, Interstellar, and Pretty Woman. After that, we discussed how to express concepts, themes, issues, and ideas. And that expression looks something like this. Text name explores the concept, theme, issue, idea of blank. Specifically, if you're to express a concept, we know that it's typically 1 to 2 words that form part of a sentence. For instance, isolationism. If you're expressing a theme, it's typically 1 to 3 words that form part of a sentence. For instance, tradition versus change. If you're expressing an issue, it's several words that form part of a sentence. For instance, Wakanda distributing its vibranium deposits. And if you're expressing an idea, that is several words that constitute a sentence. For instance, a rigid adherence to tradition can undermine progress. This example is a complete sentence. Next part of the lesson discussed examples that illustrate the interplay between a concept, theme, issue, and idea. Our first example was Black Panther, and our second example was Black Mirror. And then we summarized the interplay between concepts, themes, issues, and ideas. And you can look at the summary table in the PDF study notes. In the final main section of the lesson, we looked at past WACE exam questions. Firstly, we discussed how to approach analytical questions, and we learned here that you should explain how features, devices, and/or conventions represent the concept, theme, issue, and/or idea. Then we looked at how to approach creative questions, and here, rather than explain, you should use features, devices, and/or conventions to embed the concept, theme, issue, and/or idea. Dunsky, you have just completed the third last lesson in this module. Well, semi-completed. In order to fully complete it, you know what to do. 2 text tables, 1 for each text. They're the second last activities in this module. Smash them out, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Until then, keep it simple!